The interrogation chamber smelled of ozone and something else. Fear, perhaps, though Sergeant Marcus Chen couldn't tell if it was his own. The Vraxian queen sat across from him, her crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the harsh white light in fractured rainbows. 4 arms rested on the obsidian table between them, each hand bearing 3 taloned fingers that could tear through steel. Her compound eyes, hundreds of facets, each one tracking him, held an intelligence that made his skin crawl. "You are Sergeant Marcus Chen," she said, her voice a harmonic blend of tones that human vocal cords could never produce. Designation, Ghost 7, Human Defense Force, 3rd Expeditionary Battalion. His wrists ached where the restraints dug into flesh, blood crusted on his temple from the crash landing. Somewhere above this underground complex, his dropship burned in the sulfur swamps of Raxus Prime. 47 hours ago, your species controlled 3 star systems in this sector, the Queen continued, leaning forward.
The temperature dropped. Ice crystals formed on the table's surface.
Today we control none. Our fleets obliterated. Our ground forces in retreat. Our command structure, she paused, and Marcus saw something flicker across those alien features. Shattered. And our intelligence places you at the center of every catastrophic failure. How did one soldier end a war we were winning? Marcus met her gaze. Blood trickled down his chin from a split lip. I want to see my crew. Your crew died in the crash. Then I have nothing to say. Then I have nothing to say. The Queen's mandibles click laughter. He'd learned during the war. You misunderstand your situation, Sergeant. This is not an interrogation. This is an attempt to comprehend the incomprehensible. She gestured, and a holographic display materialized above the table. Star charts. Battle footage. Timelines marked in angular Raxian script. 72 hours ago, we initiated final protocol. Every military asset, every weapon, every soldier committed to crushing your homeworld. The numbers favored us 300 to 1. Our victory was mathematical certainty. The display shifted, showing Earth's orbital defenses crumbling under sustained bombardment. Then you did something. And now my species faces extinction while yours celebrates. Marcus watched the footage, saw human ships burning, saw defense platforms exploding like dying stars, saw the Vraxian armada, vast and terrible, descending on Earth like a metal plague. Tell me what you did, the Queen said, and I will end you quickly. Refuse, and I will keep you alive for decades, studying every cell, every thought, until I understand. Why? Marcus asked. Why does it matter now? The Queen's hands trembled, barely perceptible, but Marcus had learned to read Vraxian body language during 6 months behind enemy lines.
Fear?
'Cause, she said quietly, I need to know if we ever had a chance, or if we were always doomed the moment we chose humanity as our enemy. Marcus looked at the display again, saw himself in the footage, a grainy thermal image boarding a Vraxian dreadnought near Jupiter's orbit. Saw the timestamps, saw the cascade of failures that followed. You want to know how it ended? He said. It ended the moment you assumed humans were logical. Explain! Your species fights with precision. Strategy, mathematical certainty. You calculate odds, minimize losses, maximize gains.
Marcus leaned back despite the restraints.
We don't. We gamble. We throw ourselves into impossibilities because we're too stupid or too stubborn to accept the math. That is not strategy. That is suicide. Yeah, Marcus smiled, tasting blood. Exactly. The display changed, responding to the Queen's neural command. New footage appeared. The interior of a Vraxian command ship. Marcus saw himself there, surrounded by bodies. Human and Vraxian both. The timestamp read 46 hours ago. You infiltrated the flagship of Fleet Admiral Krathzek, the Queen said. Alone. Through 3 layers of military shielding past automated defenses that should have vaporized you, avoiding patrols that should have detected you, she zoomed the image. You carried no advanced technology. Standard human armor, conventional weapons, and yet you succeeded where entire battalions failed. I had motivation. Not sufficient. Our analysis suggests your success probability was 0.0003%. Marcus met her compound eyes. Like I said, we don't care about the math. The Queen stood abruptly, her height impressive, nearly 8 feet of predatory evolution. She circled the table, each footstep precise, controlled. You destroyed our command structure, disabled our coordination protocols, turned our own weapons against our fleets. She stopped behind him, close enough that he felt the cold radiating from her carapace. 40,000 ships, Sergeant, destroyed or crippled by cascading system failures that originated from a single point of infiltration. You, not just me. No? The Queen returned to her seat. Then who? Marcus said nothing. His jaw clenched. The display shifted again, showed a human child. Blonde hair, maybe 7 years old. The footage was from a Vraxian raid on a colony world, one of the first strikes of the war. Her name was Sarah Chen. The Queen said softly, "Your daughter." The restraints creaked as Marcus's hands became fists. She died when we glassed New Providence, along with 3 million others. The Queen paused. That was the day you volunteered for the Ghost program. The day you stopped being a logistics officer and became something else entirely. We feel it too, but we control it. Channel it through strategy and protocol. She gestured at the carnage on display, you let it consume you, transform you, and somehow, impossibly, it made you more dangerous than any weapon we've encountered. The footage showed Marcus inside the Vraxian flagship, moving through corridors like a shadow, every movement economical. Every shot precise. He barely remembered it, just flashes of red rage and training taking over where conscious thought ended. How did you know where to strike? The Queen asked. Our command ship's location was classified above maximum security. Our best warriors guard the Admiral. Our AI defense systems should have predicted every possible infiltration route. She leaned forward again. Yet you walked through our greatest protections as if they didn't exist. How? Marcus looked at her crystalline face, saw his reflection distorted in 1,000 facets. He thought about Sarah. About the last message he'd received from New Providence before the orbital bombardment turned the colony to glass. I'll tell you, he said. But first, you need to understand something about humans. The Queen waited. We're terrified, Marcus said. Every single day. Of death. Of loss. Of being forgotten. Your species evolved from hive predators. You have each other, always, connected through pheromones and neural resonance. You're never truly alone. He met her eyes. We are. Every human is isolated inside their own skull, desperate to connect, terrified of losing the connections we make. It makes us weak. Then how? Because Marcus interrupted. When you take away what we love, that terror transforms into something you've never encountered. Something that doesn't calculate odds or consider survival. He smiled without humor. It becomes certainty. The Queen's mandibles twitched. I do not understand. I know, Marcus said. That's why you lost. The holographic display flickered, responding to commands Marcus couldn't see. New footage appeared. The moment the Vaxian flagship's core went critical. The moment their entire fleet's coordination collapsed. The moment humanity's impossible victory became inevitable. Show me, the Queen commanded. Every detail. I must understand, for my species' survival. Marcus studied her, saw genuine desperation beneath the imperial bearing, saw a leader trying to save her people from annihilation. He thought about Sarah. About her last words in that final message. Love you, Dad. Come home safe. He hadn't. He'd gone hunting instead. All right, Marcus said quietly. I'll tell you how I ended your war, but you won't like the answer. The Queen's crystalline hand settled on the table. Proceed. It started, Marcus began, when I stopped being human and became a ghost. The temperature in the chamber dropped further. Outside, Varaxian guards shifted nervously, sensing something changing in their Queen's demeanor. The war was over, but its final lesson was about to be taught, and it would cost more than either species had imagined. The Queen gestured, and the restraints around Marcus's wrists released with a hydraulic hiss. He rubbed his torn skin, feeling circulation return in painful tingles. She watched him with those compound eyes, each facet reflecting his battered face back at him. You have my attention, Sergeant, she said. Speak freely. There are no guards listening. No recording devices. What passes between us remains here. Marcus flexed his hands, testing for numbness. Why the courtesy? I know humans lie more convincingly when comfortable. I need truth, not comfortable deceptions. She produced a container of water, actual Earth-standard H2O, and slid it across the table. Drink. Talk. Help me understand what happened in those final hours. The water was real. Marcus's throat ached with thirst, but he didn't reach for it immediately. Trust was a commodity he'd exhausted months ago. You want to know how I infiltrated the flagship? He said. The truth is simpler than you think. I had help. The Queen's posture shifted, surprise in Vraxian body language. Our intelligence detected no accomplices. You boarded alone from a damaged fighter. Infiltrated alone, fought alone. I had human help, just not the kind you can detect on sensors. Explained. Marcus finally took the water, drinking deeply. It tasted like home. Chlorinated, slightly metallic. Someone had analyzed Earth's municipal water supplies and replicated them perfectly. The attention to detail was unsettling. Your species shares information through neural links, he said. Pheromone markers. Genetic memory passed down through queens. You're never truly isolated from your ancestors' knowledge or your siblings' experiences. Correct. It provides evolutionary advantage. Humans don't have that. We have stories instead. Marcus set down the water. And stories can be more dangerous than any weapon you've built. The Queen tilted her head. I failed to see how primitive oral tradition. Not oral tradition. Tactical doctrine. Battle memory. Institutional knowledge passed through training debriefing after action reports. Marcus leaned forward. When you killed my daughter, you didn't just create one enemy. You created a weapon shaped by thousands of years of human warfare. Every soldier who ever fought for something they loved, every desperate last stand, every impossible victory, all of it lived in my training, in my muscle memory, in the choices I made without thinking. The holographic display shifted, responding to the Queen's commands. Footage appeared, not of the flagship infiltration, but earlier. Marcus saw himself in basic training years ago. Younger, softer. Before Sarah. Before the war. I have analyzed your military history, the Queen said. Humans win through attrition, numbers, technological advantage, not through individual action. But you studied the wrong parts of our history. Marcus gestured at the display. Show me Thermopylae. Stalingrad. Hacksaw Ridge. The display changed, pulling from captured human databases. Ancient battles. Modern conflicts. Moments when small groups or single soldiers had changed the course of wars through actions that defied logical analysis. Anomalies, the Queen said. Statistical outliers that prove nothing? They're not anomalies. They're training manuals. Marcus pointed at the footage of himself entering the Vrakian flagship. Every move I made in there came from someone else's sacrifice, someone else's impossible stand. Your AI couldn't predict me because I wasn't following doctrine. I was channeling every desperate human who ever fought when the math said they should surrender. The Queen's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. You are saying emotion overrode tactical analysis. No, I'm saying emotion became the tactic. Marcus stood slowly, testing whether she'd react. She didn't. You want to know how I knew where to strike? I didn't. I made educated guesses based on how I'd design a flagship, if I valued hierarchy and central control the way Vraxians do. I was wrong 3 times before I found the right target. Our security footage shows no failed attempts, because I adapted. Improvised. Changed objectives mid-mission based on what I encountered. Marcus paced to the edge of the chamber, studying the walls. Organic technology, he noted. Living metal that responded to Vraxian neural commands. Your systems expected logical progression. Attack pattern Alpha, then Bravo, then Charlie. I gave you pattern Omega, then Delta, then back to Alpha. Chaos that looked like strategy because I moved with purpose. The Queen stood as well, her greater height intimidating despite the apparent truce. Purpose driven by rage. No. Marcus turned to face her. Grief. The word hung between them. The Queen's exoskeleton shifted color slightly, a sign of emotional response that Marcus had learned to recognize. There is a difference. Rage burns hot and fast. It gets soldiers killed in stupid charges. Grief, Marcus's voice caught. He pushed through it. Grief is patient. It plans. It learns. It waits for the perfect moment to make the enemy feel the same emptiness you carry. The display changed again without the Queen's visible command. Showed the moment Marcus had breached the flagship's core chamber. The moment he'd faced Fleet Admiral Krathzek, surrounded by the Vraxian military's finest guards. This moment, the Queen said quietly. Our analysis suggests you should have died here. Krathzek was our most decorated warrior. His guards are elite, yet you killed them all and sabotaged our command structure. The mathematical improbability approaches— I know the math, Marcus interrupted. 0.0001% chance of success. Your analyst sent you the report. Then how? Marcus watched his own actions on the display, saw himself moving through the guards like water, each motion flowing into the next. Training, muscle memory, and something else, something he couldn't explain to someone who'd never lost a child. I didn't care if I survived, he said simply. Your guards did. That made all the difference. The Queen was silent for a long moment. Clarify. Defensive positions. Survivability calculations running in their enhanced neural systems. They wanted to win and live to celebrate. Marcus turned from the display. I just wanted them dead. No hesitation, no self-preservation. I traded wounds for kills, accepted damage that should have stopped me, pushed through pain your soldiers would have considered mission-ending. That is not combat. That is suicide. Sometimes they're the same thing. Your species doesn't have the cultural framework to understand. Marcus sat back down, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had sustained him through capture was fading. In human military tradition, we have a concept, the forlorn hope. Soldiers who volunteer for missions with near certain death. Not because they're suicidal, but because the objective matters more than their survival. The Queen remained standing. We have similar concepts. Sacrificial units deployed for strategic gain. You deploy units expecting them to die. They don't volunteer knowing they'll die. Marcus met her eyes. That's the difference. Your soldiers fight for the hive, for survival of the species. Human soldiers fight for each other, for ideas, for memories. And when those are taken away, he gestured at the display, we become something your tactical computers can't predict. Marcus saw himself plant the virus in the flagship's core systems, saw the cascade of failures begin, watched as 40,000 Vrakian ships suddenly lost coordination, their sophisticated AI networks interpreting the virus as legitimate command updates. The virus was our technology, the Queen said. Stolen from our own cyber warfare divisions. How did you access it? I found it in the remains of the colony you destroyed. Marcus's voice went flat. Your first strike on New Providence used adaptive viruses to disable our defenses. Some of the code survived in backup systems. I spent 6 months reverse engineering it. Learning your programming language. Understanding how your AI thinks. Impossible. Our encryption is based on mathematical certainty. Prime number factorization. Quantum entanglement verification. Marcus smiled without warmth. All very logical. All very predictable. I'm not a cryptographer, but I know people who are. Or knew them before your bombardment. He paused. They left notes, research. Unfinished work. I finished it. The Queen sat down slowly, her crystalline body catching the light. You are telling me a logistics officer with basic combat training defeated our entire military complex through improvisation and borrowed knowledge? Yes. That defies all probability. Welcome to fighting humans, Marcus said. We specialize in defying probability. Showed Earth's orbital defenses rallying after the Vraxian fleet lost coordination. Showed human forces pressing advantages, turning certain defeat into impossible victory. The timeline compressed, showing days of battle in seconds of footage. When our command structure collapsed, we should have adapted, the Queen said, watching her species' defeat unfold. Individual ship commanders should have continued fighting independently, yet they retreated, surrendered. Some even self-destructed rather than face your fleets. She looked at Marcus. Why? That Earth's fall was mathematically certain. When that certainty shattered, so did their will. Marcus stood again, pacing. Humans expect uncertainty. We train for it. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. Your soldiers had never experienced strategic doubt. When it hit them, they broke. You broke us, the Queen corrected. One soldier with stolen technology and borrowed tactics. You broke an empire. No, you broke yourselves when you chose mathematical certainty over adaptability. Marcus stopped pacing. Every simulation you ran showed victory. Every calculation confirmed your superiority. You committed everything because the numbers said you couldn't lose. Sound military doctrine. Fatal overconfidence. The Queen's hands trembled again, that Tel Marcus had learned to recognize. She stood abruptly, pacing to the chamber's far wall. Her reflection rippled across the living metal surface. "My military advisors recommended limited engagement," she said quietly. "Probe Earth's defenses. Test human resolve. Negotiate from a position of strength." She turned back to Marcus. "I overruled them. Ordered total commitment. Final protocol. Because the mathematics were indisputable." Marcus said nothing. Watched this alien queen grapple with the weight of her decisions. 3 billion Vraxian lives, she continued. Military and civilian, dead or dying, because I trusted calculations over caution. Because I assumed your species would behave rationally when faced with extinction. We're not rational, Marcus agreed. We're desperate, creative, and too stubborn to quit even when we should. The Queen turned to face him fully. How do we survive? Your forces have us surrounded. Blockaded. Planetary bombardment could begin at any moment. Mathematical certainty says we face the same extinction we attempted to inflict on you. Marcus thought about Sarah, about her smile, about the 3 million people who died with her on New Providence. I'm not an admiral or a diplomat. I'm just a soldier who got lucky. Luck, the Queen repeated. You attribute your success to random chance? And the fact that your entire civilization couldn't imagine a scenario where one grief-stricken father mattered more than mathematical probability? The chamber fell into shadow, lit only by the bioluminescence of the walls. Marcus could barely see the Queen's form in the dimness. I need you to do something for me, she said. Something that may save both our species. What? Tell your superiors that I surrender. Unconditionally. Immediately. The Queen's voice carried a weight Marcus hadn't heard before. Tell them I will face trial for war crimes. Accept execution if necessary. But ask them to spare my people. They were following my orders. My certainty. You have communications because, the Queen interrupted, you understand grief, loss, the weight of decisions that cannot be unmade. The lights slowly returned, revealing her face. And because you are the only human I can trust to deliver this message without demanding my species' complete destruction. Marcus stared at her, thought about Sarah, about revenge, about the billions of humans and Vrakians who died because two species had failed to find common ground before mathematics and emotion collided. I can't promise anything, he said. I know, but you can try, and trying is more than mathematical certainty ever gave me. The chamber door opened. Vraxian guards waited outside, their weapons lowered. The Queen gestured for Marcus to leave. Go, she said. Tell your people what you found here. A defeated enemy willing to surrender. A queen willing to face justice. And maybe if your species is capable of mercy, we can both learn to live with our grief. Marcus walked toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry about your people. The ones who will pay for your decisions. The Queen's mandibles clicked. Not laughter this time. Something sadder. As am I, Sergeant Chen. As am I. Marcus left the chamber, escorted by guards who no longer treated him as a prisoner. Behind him, the Queen of the Vraxian Empire sat alone in the darkness, contemplating the mathematics of survival when all certainty had been stripped away. The war had ended with an impossible victory. Now came the harder part, learning to live with what that victory had cost. The Vraxian transport shuttle climbed through the sulfur clouds, breaking into the upper atmosphere where human warships waited in orbital formation. Marcus watched through the viewport as the blockade came into view, hundreds of vessels arranged in perfect geometric patterns, weapons locked on the planet below. One word from Fleet Command, and Vraxis Prime would become a second sun. Your species demonstrates impressive restraint, the Vraxian escort said. She was smaller than the Queen, her carapace a lighter shade of blue-gray. We expected immediate bombardment after our defeat. The truth was more complicated than restraint. Humanity's leadership was divided. Hawks demanded extinction-level retaliation. Doves called for measured justice. And the military, exhausted from years of war, simply wanted clear orders that never came. Approaching the flagship, the pilot announced in clicking Vraxian, Human vessel indomitable. They're signaling permission to dock. The shuttle adjusted course, angling toward the massive dreadnought at the blockade's center. Marcus recognized the ship. He'd served aboard her sister vessel before the war, before Sarah, before everything changed. The familiar profile brought memories he'd buried under months of survival and violence. The docking sequence was smooth, professional. When the airlock cycled open, Marcus found himself facing a full honor guard. Marines in dress uniform, their faces carefully neutral. A captain he didn't recognize stepped forward. Sergeant Chen. Welcome back. Fleet Admiral Korzak requests your immediate presence in the command briefing room. I need to speak with... Immediately, Sergeant. The tone left no room for argument. Marcus followed the captain through familiar corridors, past crew members who stared at him like he'd returned from the dead. Maybe he had. The Ghost program had declared him KIA 3 weeks ago after his fighter went down. The briefing room was packed. Flag officers from every branch, intelligence analysts, diplomatic advisors. At the head of the table sat Admiral Korzak, a woman Marcus had met twice before the war, both times briefly. She looked older now, carved thin by stress and impossible decisions. Sergeant Chen, she said, voice cutting through the murmured conversations. Sit. Report. Ma'am, I have a message from the Vraxian Queen. She broadcast her surrender terms an hour ago. Unconditional submission. Request for trial rather than execution. Plea for mercy toward her civilian population. Korzak's expression was unreadable. She also specifically requested you as a witness to her sincerity. Care to explain why an enemy queen trusts a single human sergeant? The room went silent. Marcus felt dozens of eyes on him, analyzing, judging. I told her the truth, ma'am, about how I infiltrated their flagship, about why I succeeded when the math said I should have died, and that truth was that humans don't care about mathematical certainty when we're fighting for something that matters more than survival. A Colonel Marcus didn't recognize leaned forward. You gave military intelligence to the enemy? I gave her context, understanding. A way to comprehend what happened that her tactical computers couldn't calculate. That's treason, someone muttered. That's diplomacy, Korzak countered sharply. She gestured at the viewport, where Vraxis Prime hung in space, vulnerable and broken. We won this war through Sergeant Chen's actions. Actions that cost him everything personal and gained us everything strategic. If he believes this queen is sincere, I'm inclined to listen. With respect, Admiral, the colonel persisted, the sergeant isn't qualified to assess diplomatic intent. He's a combat operative, possibly compromised by what? Marcus interrupted. Grief? Rage? The same things that let me end this war? He turned to address the room. The queen isn't offering surrender because she's afraid of bombardment. She knows we're debating it. She's offering herself because she understands guilt and wants to spare her people from paying for her mistakes. You believe her? This from a woman in civilian clothes. State Department, probably. Yes. Based on what evidence? Based on recognizing someone carrying the same weight I am? Marcus's hands clenched. She lost billions because she trusted certainty over caution. I lost my daughter because I was on the wrong planet when the war started. We're both living with choices we can't unmake. Korzak stood, commanding immediate attention. The president has authorized me to negotiate terms. The question before this council is simple. Do we accept the Queen's offer or proceed with total warfare? She looked around the table. Arguments? What followed was exactly what Marcus expected. A furious debate between pragmatists and idealists, hawks and doves, those who'd lost family to Vraxian aggression, and those who saw opportunity for lasting peace. He listened in silence, watching human nature replicate the same patterns that had started the war.
Certainty versus uncertainty.
Mathematics versus mercy. Finally, Korzak raised a hand. The argument ceased. Sergeant Chen, she said, you're the only person in this room who's spoken with their leadership. You've studied their culture, learned their tactics, lived behind their lines for months. I'm asking you, can we trust this surrender? Marcus thought about the Queen's trembling hands. Her admission of failure. The weight in her voice when she'd asked him to deliver the message. I don't know, he said honestly. But I know she meant what she said. And I know that if we choose extermination, we become the certainty that destroys us. The same certainty that destroyed them. Silence. Explain, Korzak said. The Vraxians lost because they committed everything based on calculated certainty. No room for error. No plan for failure. When that certainty broke, their entire civilization collapsed. Marcus gestured at the viewport. If we decide with absolute certainty that they deserve extinction, what happens the next time humanity faces an enemy we can't predict? We'll have taught ourselves that uncertainty is weakness, that mercy is failure. That mathematical certainty is the only path forward. So we should show mercy to avoid becoming like them? The colonel's tone dripped skepticism. We should show mercy to remain human, Marcus corrected. The thing that let me win this war wasn't superior tactics or technology. It was the part of humanity that refuses to be calculated, that fights for things logic says we should abandon, that grieves and hopes and chooses to try when the math says we should quit. He looked at Korjak. If we lose that, we'll win every battle and destroy ourselves in the process. The Admiral sat down slowly. You're asking us to gamble our security on faith that a defeated enemy will honor surrender. I am asking you to remember why we fought, not to become conquerors who calculate genocide, to protect the parts of humanity worth defending. More silence. Then Korjak turned to the diplomatic advisor. Draft terms. Unconditional surrender. War crimes tribunal for leadership. Reparations structured to rebuild both civilizations. Demilitarization with verification. And, most importantly, she looked at Marcus, educational exchange programs. If we're going to coexist, both species need to understand what the sergeant learned. That certainty is a trap, and adaptability is survival. Korjak let it run for 30 seconds, then slammed her hand on the table. This isn't a democracy. The president authorized me to decide, and I've decided. We accept the surrender. We show the galaxy that humanity can win without becoming monsters. She stood, dismissed. Sergeant Chen, remain. Soon, only Marcus and Korjak remained, facing each other across the conference table. You know half the fleet will consider this weakness, she said quietly. I know. And that some of the Vraxians will see it as opportunity to regroup and strike again. Probably. Then why argue for mercy? Marcus thought about Sarah, about her voice in that final message. About the person he'd been before grief transformed him into a weapon. Because I've lived what happens when you let certainty consume you, ma'am. When you stop being human and become something else. It wins battles. He paused. But it destroys everything you were fighting to protect. The psych evaluation said you were compromised, too damaged for normal duty. They wanted to retire you with honors and extensive therapy. Probably wise, ma'am. But I'm assigning you to the tribunal instead. Observer status. The Vraxian Queen asked for you specifically, and I want someone there who understands both sides. She walked to the viewport, studying the planet below. Besides, you're right about one thing. We need people who remember what humanity means, what we're supposed to be defending. And what's that, ma'am? The part of us that chooses mercy when certainty says we should choose revenge? She turned back to him. Get some rest, Sergeant. The tribunal begins in 72 hours. And, Chen, she paused, I'm sorry about your daughter. No parent should outlive their child. Marcus felt the familiar weight settle on his chest. Thank you, ma'am. He left the briefing room, walking through corridors that hummed with life and purpose. Crew members nodded as he passed, their expressions mixing respect and uncertainty. He was a hero and a mystery, a soldier who'd ended a war through actions that defied logical explanation. In his assigned quarters, Marcus sat on the bunk and stared at his hands. They were steady despite everything. Trained for violence, shaped by grief. Used to create peace through methods no manual taught. His comm unit chirped. Incoming message, text only, source encrypted. Thank you for trying, Sergeant Chen. Whatever the outcome, you gave us hope that choices can be unmade, even when mathematics says otherwise. Queen Vraxthal, Marcus read it twice, then deleted it. No record. No evidence. Just words between two people who'd learned that certainty was a cage and grief was a teacher. He lay back on the bunk, closing his eyes. For the first time in months, he dreamed of something other than revenge. He dreamed of Sarah, laughing, telling him to come home safe. He'd never make it home to her. That future was ash and memory. But maybe, just maybe, he could help build a future where other fathers didn't have to choose between their children and mathematical certainty. Outside the ship, Vraxis Prime turned slowly in space, suspended between extinction and mercy, waiting for humanity to choose what kind of victors they wanted to be. The war was over. The harder war, against certainty, against revenge, against becoming monsters in the name of justice, was just beginning. And Marcus Chen, the soldier who'd ended an empire through grief and improvisation, would witness it all, not as a weapon, as a reminder of what humanity could become when they stopped calculating and started feeling. The tribunal convened in a captured Vraxian administrative complex, its organic architecture adapted to accommodate both species. Marcus stood in the observation gallery, watching as the Queen was escorted into the chamber by human guards. She moved with dignity despite the restraints, her crystalline exoskeleton dimmed to show submission. The proceedings were broadcast across both civilizations. Humanity wanted transparency. The Vraxians needed to see their leader face justice. And everyone, human and alien alike, needed to believe this was legitimate, not theater. Chief Justice Okonkwo, a severe woman from the International Criminal Court, presided. Flanking her were representatives from 12 human nations and, surprisingly, 3 Vraxian legal observers, volunteers from the Queen's own court who'd requested permission to witness. Queen Vraxthal of the Vraxian sovereignty, Okonkwo began, her voice echoing through translation systems. You stand accused of crimes against sapient life. Specifically, initiating aggressive warfare, ordering civilian bombardment, and genocidal intent toward the human species. How do you answer these charges? The Queen's voice came clear and steady through the translators. Guilty, without reservation or excuse. Murmurs rippled through both human and Vraxian observers. Marcus had expected this. The Queen had told him she would accept full responsibility, but the directness still shocked the gallery. You understand that under the conventions of sapient warfare, these crimes carry a potential sentence of execution? Okonkwo asked. I do. I accept whatever punishment this tribunal deems appropriate. One of the Vraxian observers stood abruptly, mandibles clicking in distress. Your Majesty, please. Legal counsel advises— I require no counsel, the Queen interrupted gently. I ordered the deaths of billions. There is no defense for such actions, no legal technicality that makes them acceptable. She turned to address the human judges directly. I ask only one thing, that you judge me fairly and my people with mercy. They followed my orders. I gave them mathematical certainty where I should have given them wisdom. Okonkwo's expression remained neutral, but Marcus saw her exchange glances with the other judges. This wasn't a normal trial. The defendant was cooperating beyond any precedent. The tribunal recognizes your plea, Okonkwo said. However, justice requires more than admission. It requires understanding. We will examine the events that led to this war, the decisions made, and the consequences suffered. She nodded to the prosecution team. Proceed. What followed was methodical and brutal. Human prosecutors presented evidence, footage of New Providence burning, casualty counts, intercepted communications showing the Queen's explicit orders. Vraxian civilians who had opposed the war testified about being silenced or imprisoned. Survivors from human colonies described watching their families die in orbital bombardment. The Queen sat through it all without flinching, her compound eyes fixed on each witness. Marcus watched her crystalline hands tremble occasionally, the only sign of emotional response. During a recess, Marcus was approached by Dr. Sarah Keating, the xenopsychologist advising the tribunal. She looked exhausted, her gray hair pulled back severely. Sergeant Chen, I need your assessment. Of what? The Queen's psychological state. Is this genuine remorse or strategic performance? Marcus thought about their conversation in the interrogation chamber. The weight in the Queen's voice. The trembling hands. It's genuine, but that doesn't mean she's broken. She's choosing this. Choosing public humiliation and potential execution? Choosing to give her species a path forward that doesn't include her? She told me herself she's trying to spare them from paying for her mistakes. Keating made notes on her tablet. The human public wants blood. Polls show 73% support execution. They see her cooperation as manipulation, not genuine accountability. People see what they expect to see, Marcus said. Humans expect alien queens to be calculating and cold. She's neither. She's guilty and grieving and trying to save her people the only way she knows how. By dying. If that's what it takes. Keating studied him. The psych reports say you're projecting your own guilt onto her. That you identify with her decisions because you feel responsible for not protecting your daughter. Marcus met her gaze steadily. The psych reports are probably right. Doesn't make my assessment wrong. No, Keating admitted. It just makes it complicated. She returned to the prosecution table as the recess ended. The afternoon session focused on the war's turning point, Marcus's infiltration of the flagship. The prosecution called him as a witness, and suddenly he was standing in the center of the chamber, under oath, facing questions he'd spent months avoiding. Sergeant Chen, the lead prosecutor said, a sharp-featured man named Rivera. Please describe for the tribunal how you gained access to the Vraxian flagship. Marcus recounted the mission in clinical detail. The damaged fighter, the radiation shielding that hid him from sensors, the improvised entry through a waste disposal port. Each step laid out like a tactical debrief, stripped of emotion. And when you encountered resistance, Rivera pressed, I neutralized it. That's an interesting euphemism for killing 14 Vraxian guards. I was at war, Counselor. They were enemy combatants defending a military target. Yet you described to the Queen in your previous conversation that you fought without regard for survival, that you accepted wounds that should have been fatal, that you were, and I'm quoting your words here, no longer human but a ghost. I was operating under extreme stress. The phrasing was metaphorical. Or were you, as the defense might argue, a traumatized soldier acting outside normal human behavior? Someone not fully in control of their actions? The Queen's voice cut through the chamber. Counselor Rivera, I object to this characterization. The entire room fell silent. Defendants didn't object during their own trials. Okonkwo leaned forward. Your Majesty, you are not in a position to... Sergeant Chen was completely in control of his actions. He fought with precision and purpose. To suggest otherwise diminishes both his achievement and my culpability. The Queen turned to Marcus. Tell them the truth, Sergeant. Not the sanitized version. The real reason you succeeded. Marcus looked at her, at the judges, at the cameras broadcasting this to billions of viewers. I succeeded because I stopped caring about surviving, he said quietly. My daughter was dead. The only thing that mattered was making sure the people responsible understood what they'd taken from the galaxy. Not just from me, from everyone who died on New Providence, from every human and Vraxian who'd die if the war continued. He paused. I became a weapon aimed at ending the war by any means necessary, and the Queen's right. I was in complete control. Every choice, every wound, every kill was deliberate. So you acknowledge acting as a vigilante? Operating outside proper military authority? No. I acknowledge doing what my training prepared me for, completing the mission regardless of personal cost. And did you consider the broader implications? That your actions would lead to Vraxian surrender? That you were, in effect, determining the fate of two civilizations? I considered that if I failed, Earth would burn and billions more would die. Success wasn't guaranteed, but failure was certain, death, for my species. The choice was obvious. Obvious to a grief-stricken soldier? Or obvious to a rational military strategist? Marcus felt anger rising, but kept his voice level. Both. Grief gave me motivation. Training gave me capability. Together they gave me a chance to end the war. I took it. The prosecution rested. The defense, which the Queen had refused, but the tribunal insisted on providing, called no witnesses. There was nothing to dispute. The Queen had ordered the attacks.
Marcus had ended them.
The facts were clear. What remained was interpretation. During the final recess, Marcus found himself alone in an observation room overlooking the Vraxian capital. The city sprawled beneath threatening clouds, its organic architecture wounded but not destroyed. Millions of Vraxians went about their lives, waiting to learn if their species had a future. Impressive view. Marcus turned. The Queen stood in the doorway, guards flanking her but maintaining distance. You're allowed to walk around? He asked. The tribunal deemed me cooperative enough to permit supervised movement during recesses. She approached the window, her reflection ghostly in the transparent material. I wanted to thank you. For what? For telling the truth. Many humans would have made me the sole monster, absolved themselves of violence by claiming trauma or orders. You owned your choices. So did you. Though I suspect we'll both pay different prices for that ownership. The Queen's mandibles clicked softly. The human judges are struggling. They want me executed but fear the precedent. They want peace but don't trust it. They want certainty in a situation that offers none. Sounds familiar. Your species and mine are more similar than either wants to admit. She turned from the window. If the tribunal executes me, will you attend? The question caught Marcus off guard. Why? Because you understand what it means to lose everything and keep functioning. I would prefer my final moments witnessed by someone who comprehends that state, rather than strangers who see only an enemy defeated. Marcus thought about Sarah, about the future that had died with her. If it comes to that, yes, I'll be there. Thank you. The Queen moved toward the door, then paused. Sergeant Chen, when you told me in the interrogation chamber that I wouldn't like the answer to how you ended the war, you were correct. But I'm grateful you gave it anyway. Understanding my failure won't undo it, but it prevents future queens from repeating my mistakes. She left, guards following. Marcus remained at the window, watching the alien city and wondering what justice looked like when both sides had committed atrocities in the name of survival. The tribunal reconvened for final arguments. The prosecution demanded execution, clean, public, definitive. The defense argued for imprisonment and forced reconciliation work, making the Queen face the consequences of her orders for decades rather than hours. Finally, Okonkwo called for the judges to deliberate. They withdrew, leaving the chamber in tense silence. Marcus watched the Vraxian observers, saw them communicating through pheromone signals humans couldn't detect, saw human survivors clenching fists, seeking closure that no verdict could truly provide. 4 hours later, the judges returned. Okonkwo stood, her voice carrying weight that transcended translation. The tribunal has reached a verdict. Queen Vraxthal, please rise. The Queen stood, dignified despite restraints. On the charges of crimes against sapient life, we find you guilty as charged. Your own admission leaves no doubt, and the evidence supports overwhelming culpability.
Okonkwo.
However, the tribunal recognizes that justice serves multiple purposes: punishment, deterrence, rehabilitation, and restoration. We must consider not only what you deserve, but what serves both our species moving forward. Marcus felt his chest tighten. This was the moment everything changed. Therefore, the tribunal sentences you to life imprisonment to be served in joint human-Vraxian custody. You will participate in mandatory reconciliation programs, educational initiatives, and diplomatic efforts to prevent future conflicts. You will face the families of those you killed and hear their stories. You will work to rebuild what you destroyed. Okonkwo's gaze was steel. Death would be easier. This tribunal chooses the harder path for you and for us. The chamber erupted. Human survivors shouted protests. Vraxian observers clicked in relief or confusion. News feeds exploded across both civilizations. Okonkwo raised her hand for silence. This tribunal recognizes that many will find this sentence inadequate.
We understand.
But we choose to demonstrate that humanity can be better than its worst impulses. That we can pursue justice without becoming executioners. That mercy and accountability are not opposites, but partners in building lasting peace. She looked directly at Marcus. Sergeant Chen's testimony convinced this tribunal that certainty, whether in warfare or justice, is a trap. We choose uncertainty. We choose to try something unprecedented. And we accept that history will judge whether this choice was wisdom or weakness. The Queen stood motionless, processing. Finally, she spoke. I accept this sentence and thank the tribunal for courage I lacked. I will spend whatever life remains to me ensuring both species learn from my failures. Court is adjourned. Marcus left the chamber as chaos swirled around him. Outside in the alien street, he found a quiet corner and activated his comm unit. No messages, no orders, just the weight of watching justice done imperfectly, trying to be mercy. He thought about Sarah.
About what she would have wanted.
She'd always believed in second chances, even for mistakes. Maybe especially for mistakes. The tribunal's choice wouldn't satisfy everyone. It wouldn't bring back the dead or erase the trauma. But it offered something else. A future where two species learned to live with their grief, instead of using it as a weapon. Marcus Chen, the soldier who'd ended a war through impossible choices, closed his eyes and let himself hope, just for a moment, that the harder path might lead somewhere worth reaching. The war was over. The peace was uncertain. And that, he realized, was exactly what both species needed. Space to be imperfect, to try, to fail forward instead of collapsing backward into the certainty that had nearly destroyed them both. In the alien sky, human ships maintained their blockade. On the ground, Vraxian civilians began processing their queen's sentence. And in the space between cultures, Marcus stood as a bridge. Broken, imperfect, but still standing. Still choosing to try when the math said he should quit. Still human, despite everything that had tried to make him something else. Still carrying Sarah's memory forward into an uncertain future. And for now, for this moment, that was enough.